Hello and welcome back. This week's project I actually started last week. It was going to be a nice simple project about some of the things people had asked me about pen turning. It sort of grew. So this week's video and next week's video are going to be part 1 and part 2 of how I make pens. I'm not going to claim anything original. All the techniques that I'm using I've taken from other people. I've taken various things from various people on YouTube and fitted them together in a way that works for me. I hope you find it useful. So this is a bit like Maudey's pen turning 101. If I dare claim it. I don't pretend to be as skillful as some of the other pen turners out there, but hopefully the pens I make you will like, and some of the techniques you see along the way may help somebody in the way they make pens. So on with part 1. So what I'm going to make is 3 slimline pens, and this is a typical slimline tube. It's a 7mm tube, the outside diameter, so you use a 7mm drill, which we'll come back to. What I've done with these initially is just to get a piece of sandpaper and just rough them up slightly so that they'll key with the glue a little bit better. And I've done that with all 6 tubes, 3 slimline pens, 2 tubes per pen. Now these tubes are about 2 inches long or about 52mm. So what I do then is I cut some blanks, and I cut them to about 55mm. And that gives me a little bit to spare. Now this next trick I learnt off Brendan at B Mac Wood Turning. It doesn't matter too much if you're only making 1 or maybe 2, but it does matter if you're making quite a lot of them, and it's a good habit to get into. The biggest problem when you make a lot of them is if you do happen to drop them on the floor, and there's a lovely video of Brendan's showing that, and I'll put the information for his channel in the description below. This enables you to put them all back together very quickly and understand which one goes where. So this one, for example, is Spanish olive. I've got that written on there, and you can see I've got a centre mark across there which tells me that is how the grain lines up, and hopefully you can clearly see that grain lines up really nicely. You can perhaps see it a little better on the zebra wood one. I then label them so they stay together. So this is 1 of 1 and 2 of 1. This is 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, 1 of 3 and 2 of 3. So that's number 1, number 2, number 3, and the 2 parts of. So even if I were to mix them up like so, I can quite easily, even if they were the same wood, very quickly put them back together by getting the numbers in the right order. So from your point of view, you can see there that they're all together now. But nice and easy to repair if you happen to get it wrong. Don't be afraid of using a Sharpie for marking these. You're going to be turning it off anyway, and the last thing you want is for the various markings to rub off, especially if you're pre-making blanks ready for working on later. One of the other things I do, and you'll see this when we come to gluing, is I always drill from the centre on both parts, so they would both go that way. I would drill this way. The reason I do that is I want to put the tubes in from this end. I don't want any tear out here because I want the tube to be as clean as possible, and I want to end up with the tube as close to this end as possible because I don't want to sand very much off here. If you look at the way the Zebrano is lining up there, if I were to sand too much off each side, then there'd be a chance that the grain wouldn't match up properly, and I want it to be as accurate as I possibly can. So I always drill from the centre to make sure I've got a nice clean cut, and you have to sand a little bit off, as you'll see, but I try to sand as little off as possible so that that lines up So here we have one of the blanks in the chuck ready for drilling. I like to drill on the lathe. I find it more accurate and easier to hold. This, as you can see, is the Purple Heart, and you can see here on the top that I'm drilling from the centre into the piece. What I do is I just make sure it's running true and then tighten it up. Now that's running nice and true. This method isn't particularly scientific, but I find it works for me. So all I'm going to do now is drill through this, and I'll show you the result after. There's a little bit of vibration on it, sadly. So I go in, and then I come out, get rid of the extra bits. The length on my quilt isn't too long, so I have to keep readjusting. Nice and slowly, and we're through. So there we are, there's a hole in that. And that one not too accurate, but it's good enough for what we want to do on this particular one. And of course, drilling from the centre here not only means that you get a nice clean cut, although as you can see the exit is good, it's a nice drill. We get a nice clean cut. We're also drilling from the centre, as I said, but as well as that, it means that the centrepiece where the grain's going to match, the hole is as close to the centre as I can get it. So what I'll do now is I'll drill the other 5 pieces and I'll come back to you. So all the blanks drilled, the next thing I do is I take a little bit of kitchen roll and just make a little pad rolled up that I can just push through the holes and pull through, and that just cleans all the dust out of the holes. I guess you could use a little pipe brush for this, but I don't have one, so I'm making do with what I've got. This does quite a good job. And just clean up all the holes, ready to take the glue. So this is the glue I use. It's a 15-minute epoxy, 2-part. I used to use a medium CA glue, but I found that went off very quickly and didn't give me much wriggle time. So I've started using this. I tried the 5-minute, that was just a bit too quick, so I've gone with the 15-minute. And I just use a piece of scrap wood as an applicator. So just squeeze some out, enough hopefully for all 3. About the same of each part, and then get it all mixed together. Mix it well. You can see I'm wearing a glove on this hand. I found I don't need one on the other. So we'll just put the glue on here, wipe it on. You'll find you don't need to go all the way to the end. You'll see why in a moment. So I'll swap that over. As I say, I always put my tubes in from the centre mark. So this is the glue end, this is the non-glue end. I'm just going to go in there, in and out a little bit, before I get to the end, so I don't get glue all in the end of it, just get a little piece of paper towel and just wipe off the excess a little as the tube goes down. And there we are. You can see that it's just and so inside the end. I don't want it to go in any further than that. I'll put that one aside and I'll continue doing the rest. So there we are. There's all 3 sets of blanks glued up. I have to leave that now for a couple of hours at least to set, and then we can get on with the sanding. So I've fitted my sanding disc to my lathe. I'm using about 120 grit. I find that enough. I have 2 sanding edges that I can work to. The outer one, which is travelling faster and therefore takes a bit more off more quickly, and the inner one that's a little finer. So I'm going to start with the inner. I can just start here with this one, and that's going to be the centre of the pen. So I'm just going to take that off, and you should actually be able to hear when I just hit the brass, because I just want to take it down as far as the brass. So the lathe on its slowest, which is about 500. And I just rotate the piece, and there you are. You can see I've just hit the brass. I'm just going to give it one more. That'll do nicely. That's lovely. So we'll do the same with the other end. Just take it out a little bit further. And that's this one done. Both ends. Just so you can see the shiny brass there at both ends, and that's absolutely fine. So we'll do the other part of that, starting with the centre. Just rotate to make sure we get an even cut. And you can hear the change there as we got to the brass. Not quite even. That's fine. Got quite a long way to go down on this one. Nearly there. You hear the change as I get to the brass tube, and there's the other half of that. Right, I'll get the others done and I'll come back to you. So having sanded all the ends down square, the next thing to do is just what we did before and clean out the insides of the tubes this time. Much better to get rid of the dust and dirt now before it goes on the mandrel than have grit flying around when you're trying to finish. So I'll just finish cleaning these off and I'll come back to you. Once they've all been cleaned out, there may still be some little bits of residual of glue, and I just use one of these. Now this is an end dressing tool. If you're not using the sanding method like I'm doing, some people put this into a hand drill and use that to dress the end of the blank to get it square. I personally don't like that. I found I get tear out. But what I do is I just pop it in both ends and make sure that the tubes are completely free of any bits of glue at the ends where I've been working. There shouldn't be any because I've sanded down, but if there is anything left, you'll struggle getting it on the mandrel. Just a little bit in that one. And I will be coming back to this tool before we finish. The next thing to do is to get the blanks on the mandrel ready for going on the lathe. This end here is going to go into my chuck, and here is what's known as a mandrel saver, which is basically a live centre with a hole in, which will slide over the mandrel at this end and go into the tailstock. Now I look at a pen from right to left, so I see the top of the pen being here and the nib of the pen being here. Bear in mind, once you've actually turned the piece, the markings you put on will have gone, so it's important to know what order things are in. So there's my order, and I'm going to put it on like so. First of all, I need to put a bushing on, 7mm bushing, and then my first piece, a 7mm bushing, and then my second piece and a 7mm bushing, and then just the pressure at the end, that little pressure bushing there which the live centre will go up to. So we've got our centre here, this is going to be my cap, and this is going to be the nib. So here's the mandrel on the lathe. This end's the cap, this end is the nib. So I'm going to turn these down now, almost to the bushings, but not quite. So they're not quite down to the bushings yet. The problem with bushings is that in use over a period of time you catch them with your chisels, you sand them down with the sandpaper, etc, etc. So I find that they become quite inaccurate. So I measure the width of the nib up to where it actually fits, which is this end of the pen of course, and that comes to about 8.4mm. So what I need to do is get these ends just slightly less than 8.4mm, and that's what I'm looking for. I can make up a fraction of a millimetre quite easily when I come to finish with CA, but up to that point I need to be as accurate as I can at each of these ends, as close to 8.4mm as I can, maybe about 8.3, and then the finishing will take that off. So I'll carry on working with the tools now till we get to that point. The sanding is going to take it down a little, so you have to also take that into account. They're all fine, so I'm going to sand those down now until I get all the tool marks out, and also to make sure they're about 8.39mm. The carbide tools have left a really good finish, so I'm going to start at 240 grit and take it to 400. I'll come back to you when I've done that. Just one final thing I should have mentioned. You may get a few little tool marks in here. It's really important on the very first grit to make sure you get rid of those. So once you've done all your rotary sanding, just by hand, just go up and down longitudinally. Wipe off the sandpaper on your overall or your smock or whatever, just to keep it as free from dust as possible, and then just work the wood. And this is going to be a beautiful pen. This is the Spanish olive wood, and it's going to be absolutely glorious. It's already getting a little bit of a shine on it. Don't forget to dress the ends properly. Because they're the bits that are really going to stand out. That's why I measure all the time, because you get a little ridge against the nib or in the centre or whatever. It completely spoils the look of the pen for me. So that's sanded down to 240 at the moment. It can still come down a little more at the two very ends here. So I'll continue with that and come back to you later.